by Leverage Edu, associate partners Gajera Trust and ICICI Bank, and TV partner Vion. Please welcome the Indian Express Chief Editor, Mr. Raj Kamal Jha.
Good evening. On behalf of the Chairman, Mr. Vivek Goenka, welcome to the 5th Ramnath Goenka Memorial Lecture, the first since the world changed sometime in January 2020. For all these years, we did every event online except this, because Ramnath Goenka, our founder, and the guiding spirit in our newsroom would not have approved of a lecture where the host can mute you. At the Indian Express, we are suspicious of that power. So we waited for Bill Gates to come in person, and here he is. You know, I was very tempted to use ChatGPT or Bing AI to get some welcome notes for Bill Gates, but I resisted. I went completely analog. I went to my 30-year-old bookshelf and I picked up his almost 30-year-old book, the first book called The Road Ahead. It's in hard copy. It still has the 1995 cash memo I got from a Mumbai airport bookstore. The book is spot on, as you all know. It's on the future of the net and its potential to change every aspect of our lives. But what is striking to me are the questions he left in the book. And I'm going to quote them verbatim. What will happen to our jobs? How will I fit into the evolving economy? Will we withdraw from the physical world into our vicarious worlds? What does it mean to live a documented life? And the one that directly links to the subject of his lecture, will the gulf between the haves and the have-nots widen irreparably? 30 years later, these questions look as if they were written this morning. And especially this evening, as in a couple of hours, less than a mile from where we sit, the G20 foreign ministers are sitting to discuss a war that rages, that has already killed thousands and has made more than 8 million people refugees. This gives these questions that Bill Gates raised in his first book a ring of urgency and sometimes despair. But Bill Gates comes to them with a sense of hope. And with the two things he has in unlimited supply, it's not money. It is science and it is hope. And he has fashioned them into a powerful tool. In his new book, he writes, "Innovation is my hammer, and I try to use it on every nail I see." He sees nails everywhere. He sees them in environment, in public health, in HIV, in gender equity, to sanitation, vaccine research, even linear algebra. These nails under Mr. Gates's hammer get shaped into pegs for social change. And most importantly, in a world of deep divisions, these secure and expand the common good. We are absolutely sure, in a world when we are not sure of anything, there is one thing we are sure of, that Bill Gates will keep saying more and more such nails. Because as he writes, and that's one of my favorite lines from his first book, he says, "I am squinting into the future and I'm going to catch that first revealing hint of revolutionary possibilities." That is Bill Gates, squinting into the future so that he can blur the lines in the way only he can, so that he can frame for us the big picture. We are very privileged this evening to get a peek into that squint. please join me in welcoming Mr. Gates to deliver the 5th Ramnath Goenka Memorial Lecture. Wonderful to see you.
Well, good evening. It's great to see you all here. I'm enthused to be back in India. I haven't been here since 2019, and I'm particularly excited to be here giving this lecture. I want to thank the Indian Express for inviting me to give the Ramnath Goenka Memorial Lecture. As the founder of the Indian Express, Ramnath Goenka instituted the highest standards of journalism in India. As a member of the first Constituent Assembly, he was one of the founding fathers of the world's largest democracy. He left behind a remarkable legacy whom many young Indians aspire to. I read a news article 25 years ago that changed the course of my life. It was a front page article in the New York Times by Nicholas Kristof, who many of you may read from time to time. And he explained how diarrhea was killing 3 million children every year, over 90% in low-income countries. It was 1997, and I just had my first child, who was named Jen. And I was worried about a lot of things when she was born, but nowhere on that list, of course, was that she would die of diarrhea or any infectious disease. And yet that's what millions of families were facing every day. And so this injustice that the market wasn't getting these life-saving tools to all of these kids, and that the chance of death in a poor country was 50 times higher than it was in the United States, became the motivating cause that I chose to work on as I reduced my time at Microsoft, particularly when I went full-time to the foundation in 2008. And so really, for the rest of my life, spending almost all of the resources, the focus will be on global health and the reduction of inequities. There has been a lot of progress since that 1997 article. In fact, I'll use that story of diarrhea and the vaccine work done here in India as sort of paradigmatic of how I see the future, because it's a very positive story about how innovation applied with human values came to the rescue. For kids under 5, diarrheal deaths have dropped about 2/3. And so here we can see that incredible result. Strangely, there was a vaccine for the thing that caused over half of these diarrheal deaths. It's called the rotavirus vaccine, but it was being given to the kids in the rich countries, not the kids in the other countries who were most at risk of dying from that disease. Part of that was that it hadn't been qualified. Part of it was that it was too expensive. And so a group came together, a new entity called Gavi, the Indian government, the Gates Foundation, and pulled together a creation of a very low-cost, high-volume vaccine. And so that eventually led to the fact that now we have 83% of 1-year-olds in this country get that vaccine. And just here in India alone, that's saving 200,000 lives every single year. You know, in global health, we talk about hundreds of thousands or millions, and you know, it's not as evocative as if I put up the picture of 1 child or 2 children. But you know, we've gone globally from 10 million deaths a year down to less than 5 million a year of children under 5. And India's made even more progress than that global average. For example, measles is a great example. This is a vaccine where the coverage in India wasn't super high if you go all the way back to the year 2000. In fact, to get the coverage way up, they decided to give a second dose. And so you can see on the right, almost miraculous improvement. And this news is so good, it's almost hard to write a headline. What day do you write this headline? And so it was 114,000 deaths a year, now down below 5,000, a 96% reduction. It's not as simple as just getting the vaccines out. Of course, India had to invest in the primary healthcare system. So the next slide talks about that. And so this is tougher. This requires training and salaries and things. But the number of births that you have skilled health personnel went from 43% now to about 89%. And the net result of that is that even the mothers, we dropped maternal mortality by 59%. Another example that is based on incredible work here in India, which our foundation helps support, is in empowering people, particularly women, with bank accounts. Even just in 2011, only 26% of women have access to a bank account. That's now 78%. So the gender access has been eliminated. We still have more to do. Not all those accounts are active all the time, and we want to get the number to 100%. But this is the fastest progress that any country's had. And of course, behind that is the incredible digital stack, Aadhaar, the great digital revolution that a lot of people here in India drove, including the regulations that the government had to take some risk, but that's worked fantastically. And I do want to acknowledge that we face huge challenges. The pandemic, even though we knew that risk was there, and voices, including mine, said we should have been better prepared, it was a gigantic setback. Globally, over 20 million lives, and education loss, health systems interruption. India, fortunately, is now back to vaccinating as many kids as they did before the pandemic. But for countries in Africa, it's probably going to take us 3 years just to get back to where we were, and then get back to making improvements. So the health system showed great strain. Then we have knock-on effects of a war in Europe, and that's causing fertilizer, food, and energy prices to be more expensive. And who gets affected the most? As usual, it's the poorest. And if you look at poor farmers, they're buying far less fertilizer, which will affect their yields many years into the future. And that drives malnutrition, it drives ill health, and it's almost a poverty trap. So we do need to deal with those challenges. And then finally, we have the challenge of climate. It's very different. It just gets worse and worse slightly every year. But it's one of the hardest things to fix, because modern economies throughout the globe are based on energy intensity. And over 80% of those energies come from burning hydrocarbons. So for India, at a time where we want to increase electrification dramatically, we also have to switch all of that to be green energy. And we have to take many applications that used hydrocarbons directly and switch those to electricity. So the challenge of what needs to be built and stay cheap and stay reliable is pretty incredible. I find these challenges exciting. As was said in the introduction, I always see a chance for innovation. If we can get young people and kind of explain that challenge to them and get capital to them, and then I think innovation can help continue the human progress that really, if you zoom out and look at the last 700 years, is really been incredible. Now, climate is a cause where most of the emissions that are up causing this heating come from the rich countries, and yet most of the damage will be in middle income or lower income countries that are near the equator. So, it's an incredible injustice. And so even though it kind of creeps up on you, we need to act now. We need to act in a very big way, and I'll talk about why I think we are getting on track for that. So I'm an optimist. Let me dive into some example innovations that make me feel that way. We talked about COVID-19. Well, COVID-19, even though in some ways it's a story that we weren't perfectly prepared, what health workers did to step up during the crisis, what vaccine manufacturers, including the big manufacturers here in India did to make vaccines not only for this country, but for the entire world did. There's a lot of great innovation that took place there. One example is in diagnostics. India scrambled and drove up its capacity to do both point of care diagnostics and to do the highly accurate PCR diagnostics. India had the most, 2 million a day. They had the lowest cost at $5. Looking at, okay, now that we can step back and say, okay, in a future pandemic, we'd want this to happen even faster and to be even cheaper. There are inventions now that can take this cost and bring it down by even another factor of 10. Very gigantic machines to do these tests. They were inspired actually not by human health, but by looking at the genetics of seeds, testing seeds, and that process, because it was so large scale, created a machine that is far better. We'll also see diagnostics, point of care diagnostics, that are very, very cheap, and we'll be able to use a manufacturing technique to make those diagnostics, so you can literally make 16 million tests a day with a single manufacturing plant. This is called reel-to-reel lamination, and it's a new technique, and it can make these phenomenal diagnostics. Another thing we'll do is we'll look in the sewage. They call it environmental sampling, and we'll see outbreaks far more rapidly than ever before. That was, during COVID, that was a very good leading indicator. In fact, we look at all the data, the sewage sampling was the best at predicting where the disease was going. And amazingly, you can see in sewage all the different disease pathogens, what's going on with the flu, what's going on with diarrheal diseases. And so getting that out to the world the same way that's been done for specific diseases like polio is very, very exciting. And the climate challenge, I also frame that as a innovation challenge. I think of philanthropy, even though it's a very small part of the economy, even in the US, where you have a lot of giving, it's like 2%. But there are some things that philanthropy is suited for that government spending and private sector spending are not going to go after. When you have a disease like malaria, where the people who have it essentially have no economic power, it's not that attractive to go in and make a vaccine or to make a new generation of drugs. And so their philanthropy is very, very important. With climate change, we can't just use philanthropy. That 2% is not enough to reinvent the industrial economy. We have to use price incentives and have lots of innovative new companies. So there, although there'll be some philanthropy, there'll also be lots of startup companies and lots of policies that helps to drive things forward. The paradigm in climate change, the way you should think about progress is that green products that are made with none of these greenhouse gas emissions, many of those are very expensive. So if you try to buy jet fuel that's green, no emissions, it's twice as expensive. If you want to buy cement with no emissions, it's twice as expensive. Now, someone could say climate's important. Let's get somebody to just write a check for that extra cost, what I call that green premium, and then we're done. But sadly, that would be trillions of dollars a year, and there just is no fund where you can take money away, even in the rich countries, even the ones that care the most about climate. And so here, how do you get there? Well, you get there through innovation that shrinks that green premium. And you've all seen that in places like solar panels and wind, that innovation makes it so if put into the appropriate system, the electricity that comes out will remain reliable and the cost in some cases can even be lower. Now in 2015, when the Paris climate event was coming together, I was really worried that the only topic of discussion was the short-term metrics. And it's good to have metrics where you say, okay, how much did we reduce our emissions? But this idea of getting innovation charged up was not on the agenda. And so in fact, I was able to have discussions with Prime Minister Modi, President Obama, and other leaders, and we put together a side conference called Mission Innovation in 2015. And that's when I committed that, given that these governments were all committing to make big increases in their energy R&D budgets, which had not happened up till that time, I committed through Breakthrough Energy to raise private capital to take those ideas, fund startups, and get those out into the market. So bringing in risk capital, bringing in IQ, bringing in an acceleration of innovation. Usually when we innovate, we don't have a deadline, but in this case, we have a deadline of not only coming up with inexpensive ways to do it, but deploying them so that you replace all the steel plants and cement plants worldwide. And so it will be a very hard thing, but I'm seeing great progress. There's over 100 companies now that have been funded just because they have technologies that can help with climate. They'll not all succeed. We'll need some additional ones, but it really is starting to happen. A good example is that about 90 minutes from here, in Rohtak, there's an entrepreneur named Vidyut Mohan who was funded by Breakthrough to take this idea. His company is called Takachar, where he takes post-harvest crop waste and he, using a biochar technique, makes valuable byproducts. So biofuels, fertilizers, and it looks like it'll be an affordable solution that will help even in remote agricultural communities, that it can take waste and create something that has value and do it in a way so that it's completely green. So those bioproducts can contribute to solving the climate emissions, which we call climate mitigation. Now with climate, sadly, we just mitigating it by 2050, as hard as that is, that's not enough because there will be tougher conditions in between now and then, because this warming is making things like growing crops far more difficult. I was out at ICAR today, and they have some great experimental facilities where they look at crops and how much productivity you lose as it gets warmer. And it is a big challenge. It's a challenge here in India. It's a challenge in Africa. In Africa in particular, the losses they've already seen because of heating is almost 30%. And you know, as countries that are on the edge, they're going to have a lot more people with malnutrition, which means that the health outcomes will also be a lot worse. And so we have to do adaptation work, you know, stay true to improving health at the same time that we're doing the mitigation. The ICAR that I went to in Pusa, they're doing some work on chickpea. And right now, the current chickpea is very sensitive to high temperature. It looks like it's a 70% drop in productivity. But by breeding and using advanced techniques, they'll be able to make chickpea that actually, even in the face of that high temperature, is even more productive. So going in the other direction and helping out those farmers deal with both temperature and the fact that although there'll be more rain, there'll be long periods without rain and then periods with lots of rain. So this global innovation boom, taking on the tough problems in health, taking on the tough problems in climate, Now, the world is counting on India to play a central role. You've got 700 million young people. You have educational institutions that just get stronger. And so we need innovation from the whole world, but a lot specifically from India. At Microsoft, we chose to put a development center here in 1998. It's been a fantastic thing, a lot of great work. We even, our CEO, Satya Nadella, is quite fantastic, came to us partly because we had such a strong connection here. And so one thing that we've really seen in India is a drive towards low-cost, scalable solutions. I mentioned vaccines, companies like Serum, Bharat, BioE. I mean, they make amazing, high-quality, low-cost vaccines. The rotavirus vaccine came out of that, and I showed you how it saved lives in India, but that's only a quarter of the story. It saved 3 times as many lives outside India because that Global Vaccine Alliance funded the purchase to get to almost all of the world's children. And that repeated itself with COVID. A lot of vaccines for India, but then a lot of vaccines that went all over the world. Another example that's fortunately being highlighted as part of this G20 year is the digital public infrastructure, things like the Aadhaar identity system and the financial empowerment that I mentioned has led to that large number of bank accounts. But it doesn't stop there. We use it to pay health workers efficiently. It's being used to get loans out to farmers to get the right fertilizer. In fact, the innovation on top of that digital platform is really just beginning. And so instead of waiting for decades to get bank accounts, instead, India's leading the way in showing all sorts of innovative applications. And so a goal that we're excited to support India in is taking that platform and getting as many other countries as possible to benefit from that. So that'll be a huge positive outcome over India leading the G20. So this is a time of great innovation. When you read the tough news about prices, inflation, the war, and all those things, those are legitimate problems. But the reason that I can look at that and the creeping challenge of climate is that I see that innovation is moving faster today than ever. And we're looking to India for a significant part of that so that we can overcome the world's great challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. I'd request you to stay on stage, please. Please welcome Mr. Ramnath Goenka, Executive Director, the Indian Express Group, who will now be in conversation with Mr. Gates.
Is this mic on? Thank you. Mr. Gates, wait for that. Is it always Diet Coke or?
Mostly. It's very consistent worldwide.
Yeah. Firstly, Mr. Gates, thank you so much for that incredible clarity of thought. It was really insightful. We learned a lot. Thank you for your charity. Firstly, that's I think the world's a better place because of that. So I think if we can give one sort of acknowledgement. And I think thank you for your optimism that you painted. You were right in putting the asterisks because that was as a news person coming in my mind as you were speaking. So thank you for the optimism. I guess, I think my question is, what are the obstacles to making this all happen? Is technology the obstacle? Is it resources? Is it just human focus, human will, political will, human focus? What's that one thing that you think is sort of holding us back to make these innovations happen faster? Because certainly the problems are only, getting larger and larger.
Well, we certainly have a challenge that the places where you have the resources and the ability to, give money or help use science to solve these problems is often very distant from where the problem is. So for example, the suffering of malaria, if the people literally who live near you, were the ones who are having those problems, you would probably buy bed nets for them. And you would try and advocate for a research program to bring that horrible disease to an end, which hopefully we will. Even within India, the places with the toughest challenge are far away from where you have the most sophistication. I'd always hoped that the digital tools would essentially shrink distance and make us understand what people are doing and have more humanity. And we've seen some of that. We've also seen that you get to kind of draw in to your own ideas. And so it's also been a force for polarization. And you have this struggle of, does it make us more find what's going wrong with our fellow man and see what's going well? Or do we just, go into often some non-factual dead ends that sort of pit people against each other?
So you are acknowledging that there are conflicts globally. I mean, in solving these issues, there are very real conflicts. I mean, I live in Mumbai. We were just discussing that. I don't think any major city in the world is building a metro in the year 2023, right? Building a metro from scratch. So we are, we need to do this. We have to invest in that. Do you think the solutions, therefore, will be much more localized and customized to India's needs, or will they be global solutions then?
Well, it'll certainly be a mix. I mean, the really key technologies like the green way of making cement, the green way of making steel, can you power jet planes with hydrogen instead of with hydrocarbons? Those technologies will get invented and competed on a very global basis. There's not a country that's not talking about green hydrogen as something that they want to bring into their economy because it actually solves a lot of these different climate things. But the path you go about it will have to be local. So for example, this grid, this gigantic green grid, for India, you're actually kind of blessed because you have a fair bit of wind, a fair bit of solar, and so you'll solve it in a certain way. For a country like Japan, it's very difficult. They don't have the same land mass. And so hopefully for them, some form of nuclear will be both economic and safe and acceptable for them. Because otherwise, they kind of face a dilemma. Do they want to depend on other countries for their energy supply? But to be green is a particular challenge that varies country by country. The US is very lucky. We're a gigantic country. And so even if the wind's not blowing in the Midwest, it's blowing somewhere. Even if it's not sunny in one location, it's sunny somewhere. So if we build a big enough grid, we can draw, and actually we trust Canada enough to make it more of a North American project instead of just the United States.
The problems that we're talking about and that we're facing, do you ever think about the fact that, a lot of it is coming from a vision of development, a vision of life, a picture, and that was kind of painted by the West. So, especially when you talk about India, you have people who say that, we've been actually living a fairly sustainable life. I mean, our lifestyle is fairly sustainable in India. But the ambition, the American dream, which is now the world's dream, it's all of our dreams, that picture got painted somewhere in the West. Do you think about that fact that maybe?
Well, I don't think we can count on people living a impoverished lifestyle as a solution to climate.
Right.
And yes, meat consumption in India will be less. That's good for your health. That's wonderful. Will all Indians become vegetarians? Will all Americans become vegetarians? I wouldn't want to count on it. Anybody who wants to evangelize that, they're welcome to. I won't resist in any way. And so yes, in climate movements, you can kind of get this, hey, we've been consuming too much, and hey, maybe we shouldn't travel anymore. Reducing demand in the rich countries, the US in particular, we could use half as much energy per person. But if we said to India to stay at your current level, that would be completely unjust.
Yes.
And so most of the demand for more energy, more cement, more steel is coming from middle-income countries
Yes.
like India, where even if you stop at, say, a quarter of American energy intensity, the climate change is very, very dramatic.
Yeah.
And so, I'm not saying, hey, consume as much as possible, but we ought to give people that option. Take, for example, air conditioning.
Yes.
If you're tough, don't buy air conditioning. It's good for the climate if you sleep in hot weather. But as India gets warmer and warmer, I'm betting the demand for air conditioning is going to skyrocket. The country that has the most air conditioning by far is the United States. Even Europe doesn't have what we have. And so as it gets hotter, you demand more electricity, which if it's not green, then you're in a positive feedback loop.
Sure. And all the innovations that are going to solve these problems and that we've spoken about, a lot of them, I mean, such lovely examples you've dug out from India itself. But there is this kind of idea, this thought that the innovation, there is one sort of realm of the school of thought which says that you need to incentivize innovation, you need to incentivize R&D, and so make it commercially viable for people to invest time and effort in R&D. And there's an opposing school of thought which says, once you invented something, which is going to solve the world's problems, share it. Don't be exploitative. Don't be, don't make it expensive. Especially in healthcare, this comes up a lot. What's your prescription for that sharing of technology that's going to help the world?
Well, in healthcare, we do have a solution that's kind of ideal, which is that the return that allows drug companies to have profit comes to them primarily from their sales in the rich countries and somewhat from middle-income countries. And that for lower-income countries, the price should be just what it costs to make the medicine. In fact, because these countries either don't enforce the patents or people don't even file the patents, and now the pharmaceutical companies understand the expectations. So, the foundation has helped create a patent pooling mechanism. And we were talking to the generic drug manufacturers here in India who go to that and actually make incredibly low-cost medicines. And so, we help them. Their profit margins are low enough that sometimes we have to grant them money around because it is a low-margin business. So this tiered pricing approach works very well in medicine. Most climate technologies, I do think market competition will make the price, as people are seeking volume from these things, it'll make it very low. But if there's some key climate technology that only one person has, then the political process about, okay, which country should really pay for this and have that intellectual property, something will kick in because climate is a global problem. In fact, it's a problem that is worst in the countries that have the toughest challenge.
Right.
And so I don't think we have to a priority say that the market won't solve these things. I think we can sit there and say if the market isn't driving the availability of great solutions, then yes, government will step in.
Do you think Big Pharma needs a brand makeover in developing countries then, or?
Big Pharma has done a lot of incredible invention. Like there's now a new class and there's a lot coming of obesity drugs. So I'm not going to stick up for everything Big Pharma does.
Yeah.
Some of this pricing stuff is very complicated.
Right.
But overall, yes, I think the fact that they hire smart young people, they run $500 million Alzheimer's drug trials, and yet there they are, continuing. Is there a pricing system better than the one, certainly in the US? Yes, and the bill that's mostly known as a climate bill, the IRA bill, actually has some very complicated reform for pharmaceuticals in the United States.
Just a little bit about nuclear energy. Does it frustrate you about where it is right now? I know that you've invested in companies that are working in that space. The previous party that was running this, that was in government, almost take its whole reputation and government for nuclear energy. But somehow, it doesn't. Where do you see nuclear energy fitting in into
What
the whole-
happened with nuclear energy is that, unlike computers where the prices kept going down, the complexity of the nuclear reactors kept going up. And so by the time that they got to what we have today, that's called third generation, they really priced themselves out of the market. The overruns, the costs were just incredible.
Yeah.
And then cheap natural gas came in and made it very tough. And so the nuclear industry didn't invent a new design. What's necessary is to start from scratch and to do a bit different of a reactor. Now, I'm very biased on this. I have over $1 billion in a company doing this, and it could fail. And I'm not doing it to make money. I'm doing it because it may contribute to the climate issue. So there's nuclear fission, that there'll be a new generation of designs that will be dramatically cheaper and safer. Then there's nuclear fusion.
Yes.
I'm actually an investor at a lower scale in 4 of about 16 companies that seem to be making some progress there. We can't count on it.
Yep.
There's a few of them that say in 10 to 15 years, if everything went perfectly, they think they could make cheap electricity. And so that, we have to keep an open mind that will nuclear fission solve its problems? Will nuclear fusion come into existence? It would be great for humanity if those solutions worked well. Now, technologists have often overpromised in terms of schedules or various things. So it's fine for people to be skeptical, but I'm one of the people trying to drive both of those forward so that as the climate damage gets worse, we have as many options as possible to build this new energy system. And nuclear, because it's not weather dependent, it's very nice if you can mix that in. I mean, I'm the biggest fan of building solar and wind as fast as you can. Build more grid as fast as you can. That is super good, and it's really great to see India. The curve is really kicking in, and some of the big companies are now teaming up with the small companies and announcing breathtaking projects.
And the price of that energy is actually comparable, if not cheaper, than sometimes.
Yeah, if you get up to very high percentage renewable, where you have no coal plants, no natural gas plants, the reliability issue is very hard. And so I'm funding some open source software so that institutions all over the world, including some in India, can look at your future grid and say, okay, what mix will allow us, during different periods of year, the wind and the sun varies a lot. And so some of the times where you want the most energy is when you would be generating. So anyway, engineers will work on that problem, but anything you do in renewables, you'll be glad that you did.
We should get to artificial intelligence, because that's the big question everybody has. We couldn't get a better oracle than you to talk about this. How do you see this playing out? Are we ready for it?
We may never be ready. The dream, as somebody who grew up thinking about software and what software could do and not do, AI was always the dream. And how is it that humans are so good at recognizing images and recognizing speech? And even, say 5 years ago, things like image recognition or speech recognition had gotten very good. So it's kind of your peripheral senses. The machine was at human or even slightly better levels, but it could not read. It could memorize the document, so you could say what's on page 34. But if you said, hey, pass this complex biology test about this biology textbook, it just couldn't do it. And what's amazing is that the current AI work, these large language models that are called general predictors, they now are showing they can read and they can write. They're not perfect, but for anybody who's played even with ChatGPT-3, you'll sometimes get answers that stun you how stupid the thing is, and you'll sometimes get answers like, whoa, that is so fluent and so creative. I mean, it's spooky, and I'm playing with something even better than that, and believe me, it's even spookier. And mostly in a positive way. I mean, people are surprised now I can write poems that are rhyme very well, and songs and greetings. And so we're at the beginning of computers that help in ways that they never could before.
Right.
And I think the pace of innovation will be very rapid. And so I've gone to full day meetings where we sit and talk about, okay, in healthcare, how do we use this to find more drugs, to give advice to patients? I've gone to a full day thing, with Microsoft, OpenAI, and Foundation people where we talk about education. Can we make a tutor that knows your level of understanding and understands your motivation? And so that, if you like sports examples or medical examples, it's doing it that way. And so this is the biggest thing happening in tech. I mean, yes, we'll, have 3D glasses and everything, but this is way more profound because the productivity of even white collar jobs now is being greatly enhanced over the next 2 or 3 years.
I'll do a quick rapid fire with you, Mr.
Okay.
Gates, because then we're out of time, and I've got a few questions from the audience. We've got a lot of questions, I know, but I will only take a few. What gives you more joy, earning money or giving it away?
Well, I'm worth less every year, so I hope I enjoy giving it away. I'm voluntarily giving it away, and I'm having a blast. So I had fun making it too.
When's the last time you used ChatGPT, and what did you type?
I was using the version that comes after that last night, and I was telling it to write things in Hindi. Of course, I had no idea
If it was accurate or not.
what it was writing. But I play around with it. Whenever I have friends over, we're always, joking around.
Which authoritarian regime is a better hub for innovation, Russia or China?
Well, the degree of innovation in China is quite significant. I mean, nothing like US levels. Russia, lower population, very good in mathematics, but beyond that, they never really learned how to scale things up. They completely exited from medical innovation, even though 50 years ago they were very good. So, I feel sorry for the young generation there that should be contributing to health advances and IT advances. And now that's going to be largely blocked from them, or some of them are leaving the country because of that.
I have a question that I can't resist asking, but we've wanted to say that free speech is at the center of innovation, right? I mean, do you feel that way? That I'm asking because I feel a lot of people in India, talk about why can't we be like China? Why can't, or people think about moving to Dubai, or they think about moving to Singapore? And I just feel like unless there is an environment of free speech, that doesn't allow innovation to happen. I mean, have you made a connection between the two?
Well, the Western democracies in India have set a great example for the world of their openness, including free speech and a press that can push back on the political leaders. And we need that more now, speaking for the United States, than ever. So that's fantastic. It shouldn't blind us to the fact that China, even in a system that you might think would hold these things back, there are some significant innovative things that happen in China. So, they study us, and what we do well, we should study them, and what they do well. So it hasn't blocked it. Tsinghua is a top 10 world university, and Microsoft has a research group in Beijing, which is every bit as good as our research group in Bangalore, or Cambridge, UK, or Seattle, Washington, or Boston. It's a phenomenal. So human capability to innovate is pretty universal, and you have to have a pretty bad regime to completely suppress that.
You're one of the smartest, richest people alive. When was the last time you felt helpless?
Helpless? I've had a very lucky life. There was an antitrust lawsuit against Microsoft. The US government was like 1,000 times more powerful than Microsoft.
The one thing you've learned from Steve Jobs?
Oh, Steve, really different. I mean, he never wrote a line of code, but his sense of design, Steve was such a unique person and was able to get a lot out of people. Now, he sometimes would overwork people, so it wasn't a perfect thing, but Steve was amazing. I learned a lot from him.
I'll ask the last question. I know that, and it's a little odd one, but I want to know your answer anyway. Do you believe there's life on other planets?
Do I believe there's life
on other planets?
I'm doubtful there's this thing called the Drake equation where you look at the probability, what it took for life to come on this planet. And, as you get to more complex life forms, it looks like, that wasn't that probable. But this is one of those things that you may have to have a sense of faith in.
Yes.
Because, during my lifetime, we're unlikely to answer the
Yes.
question.
Yes. Okay, I think I'll have to get to the audience. We'll just take two questions. If I can ask Mr. Rudra Pratap, ask the first one, please. Go ahead. Is there a mic there? Yeah.
Sure. I'm Rudra Pratap. I'm Vice Chancellor of Raksha University, which is in Mohali, Punjab. Lots of things that you have addressed throughout your life in last 30, 40 years, health, climate, sustainability, all of this. At the bottom of it all is education of humans. And I haven't seen as much effort from you on improving education the way it exists today. We all are concerned about education. There is a pandemic of sorts in education, and you know it very well. If only the entire populace were educated well, many of these problems wouldn't exist. So what do you think about the current state of education, and what would you like to change?
Yeah, that's going to be hard to answer in a short reply. The Gates Foundation spends over $500 million a year on education. About 80% of that is focused in the United States. And when I started the foundation, I thought, okay, we're going to do education in the United States, and it's, that we'll just study the best teachers and show the other teachers how to do what the really great teachers do. And we'll make progress in that, and this health thing will take us a long time. It turned out the other way around. The health work, very quickly we got new vaccines and started to see results, even though it was in some of the countries are challenging environments. In education, we've had some results where we improved the curriculum. We have some results where we train teachers in a better way. The willingness of teachers to adopt different practices. Some governments run a real personnel system where great teachers are identified and rewarded, and teachers who don't teach well are told that they need to work better. And so it has been an area that we've had some good results, but hopefully most of that's in front of us. Once again, I'm optimistic because I think the experiments we're doing with the AI, where the student can play around and get, like on their papers, a lot of really good feedback, I'm hopeful. But you're absolutely right. We picked health as our main priority. The second most important thing, and I hope other philanthropists, including a lot of Indian philanthropists, do pick that, is education. Those are, rise above many other causes, but those are the two most primal. If you improve education, you kind of improve a lot of things, including, being a good citizen.
I think we take one last question. Dr. Krishna Ella is here. Dr. Krishna Ella? Oh, yeah.
So glad to have you in India. One, I want to remember your father. Before the Gates Foundation formed, William Gates, Gordon Perkin, Jim Menard, all of them, were instrumental in the beginning, 99, and then 2000 with the Gates Foundation. And we were the recipient of your grant, first grant by the Gates Foundation. And I think that startup, that funding, really helped us to bring today Covaxin, because we were able to build the innovation culture, and we were able to build that clinical research experience in the country. Leave apart, I don't want to ask my IT ministry is next to me. I want to ask a simple question now. The COVID software, what has been done in the Indian government is phenomenal on the software, COVID immunization. Now, what the data, you have more than 1 billion population of data. What can be used the data, and how that can be further digitalized for future of the healthcare of this country? Thank you.
Yeah, I was over at the health ministry today, and I went down to see the control center they used which is a great piece of software work done here in India that helped get the vaccination coverage up. So great achievement. And I was really pleased to see that they're going to keep that center in place and now track things like supply chain, vaccination coverage, be ready to see any outbreak and jump in on that. The government's whole goal under the phrase ABDM of digitizing the health system, there's some incredible initiatives under there, many of which we're helping supercharge with the grants that we make. I really do think it's going to all come together, so the quality of healthcare is much better. And when you get outbreaks, it's going to be far more rapid. It's another case where, because India always wants to do things on a very economic basis, it may be a set of health system software that, like the digital infrastructure, is valuable to other countries. We need that. We don't want to take, some things the US does really well and everybody should just learn from. Our health system is not that case. It's just too complicated and too expensive. So we need places like India to make contributions like this.
Mr. Gates, thank you so much for your time. I think you can write the thanking note, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Gates and Anand, for that insightful conversation. Mr. Pankaj Agarwal, Vice Chairman, GL Bajaj Educational Institutions, will now deliver the vote of thanks.
Good evening to one and all present here. I'm honored to have the opportunity to extend my gratitude and appreciation to our distinguished guest speaker, Mr. Bill Gates, founder Breakthrough Energy and co-founder Microsoft, for gracing us with his presence and sharing his invaluable insights and experiences. The fact that he has made a journey across the seas to be with us today is truly an honor. During one of your speeches, Mr. Gates, you emphasized on the importance of innovation and how it can be achieved through funding research and acquiring basic knowledge. As the head of GL Bajaj family, this thought of yours resonates with mine. I firmly believe that in the times to come, research and entrepreneurship will be the driving forces behind progress. As a stepping stone, GL Bajaj has established the Research and Incubation Center, which has successfully incubated 32 startups so far and has recently been designated as a Prayas Center by the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. I gladly share that GL Bajaj is one of the 14 Prayas centers chosen across India this year, and we have been granted rupees 3 crore by the Government of India to support and promote entrepreneurship. Few of our alumni have also achieved awards like the Best Electric Vehicle of the Year Award and the Ericsson Innovation Award at the national level for their innovations. And a few of them were honored by the Prime Minister of India himself. It would be my pleasure to extend the invitation to you to visit our campus in the near future to share your insights and how we can work together to build a technological education ecosystem that would have the potential to positively impact the human life. I am sure that you will consider our request. Finally, I would like to thank Ramnath Goenka Foundation for their tireless efforts in organizing this lecture series and for their commitment to promoting the values of journalism, freedom of expression, and pursuit of truth. I would also like to appreciate the efforts of the entire team of the Indian Express for working day in and day out to make this event a resounding success. Thank you all for being a part of this thought-provoking and inspiring lecture. Have a wonderful and delightful evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Agarwal. Please stay on stage. I would like to invite back Raj Kamal Jha, Mr. Gajera, Mr. Chaturvedi, and Ms. Swanshu Khurana to present a token of our gratitude.
Request Mr. Agrawal to also join on stage, please. The illustration is by the Indian Express chief political cartoonist, Mr. E.P. Onni. Request Mr. Chaturvedi to also join on stage. Thank you, gentlemen. And Ms. Khurana. Thank you, Mr. Gates, for that inspiring glimpse into the future. I'd like to thank our partners, presenting partner GL Bajaj Educational Institutions, co-presenting partner Leverage Edu, associate partners Gajira Trust and ICICI Bank, and TV partner Vion, and of course, each of our guests here tonight. To join us for high tea, request everyone to remain seated till Mr. Gates leaves the room. Thank you, and good night.